In the United States, law enforcement interactions with citizens are governed by constitutional rights, primarily the Fourth Amendment, which protects individuals from unreasonable searches and seizures. This protection applies to police stops, detention, searches, and arrests, and is a cornerstone of American civil liberties. Understanding when police can legally stop you and what your rights are during such stops is critical for staying safe and avoiding legal trouble. Generally, police officers need what is known as reasonable suspicion or probable cause to stop someone. Reasonable suspicion is a standard that requires officers to have specific and articulable facts that indicate criminal activity is occurring or about to occur. It is more than a mere hunch or intuition, but less than the level of proof required for an arrest. Probable cause is a higher standard and typically involves facts or evidence that would lead a reasonable person to believe that a crime has been committed or that a person possesses evidence of a crime. The distinction between these two standards is important because it determines how officers can legally interact with citizens and what level of intrusion is permitted. For example, during a traffic stop, an officer only needs a lawful reason such as a traffic violation to pull a driver over. Common reasons include speeding, running a red light, failing to stop at a stop sign, improper lane changes, or equipment violations such as broken taillights. Once the vehicle is stopped, the officer may ask for the driver's license, vehicle registration, and proof of insurance. During this stop, the officer is allowed to observe any suspicious behavior or other signs of illegal activity. This could include the smell of alcohol or drugs, visible contraband, or nervous behavior during questioning. If the officer develops reasonable suspicion that criminal activity is occurring, they may detain the individual briefly for questioning. This is often referred to as a Terry stop, which originates from a Supreme Court case that allows officers temporarily detain someone if they have reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. Even in a Terry stop, the detention must be brief and the scope limited to questioning, and in some cases a protective frisk for weapons. The purpose of the frisk is strictly for officer safety and cannot be used to search for evidence of a crime without additional probable cause. If an officer stops a person without reasonable suspicion or probable cause, the stop is considered unconstitutional under the Fourth Amendment, and evidence obtained as a result of the stop may be challenged in court and potentially excluded from being used in a criminal case. However, there are exceptions where police may stop individuals without individualized suspicion. One example is DUI checkpoints, which are allowed in many states. These checkpoints are designed to check all drivers for signs of intoxication and must be conducted according to strict legal guidelines to ensure they are not arbitrary or discriminatory. Another example is consensual encounters, where an officer approaches someone in a public space and asks questions. In this scenario, as long as the person is free to leave and not physically detained, the interaction does not require reasonable suspicion or probable cause. During such encounters, you have the right to decline to answer questions and you can legally walk away unless the officer has a lawful reason to detain you. A critical distinction in all these interactions is knowing when you are being detained and when you are free to go. Being approached by an officer does not automatically mean you are under arrest or detention. If an officer physically restrains you, blocks your path, or explicitly states that you cannot leave, you are considered detained. At this point, you have specific constitutional rights, including the right to remain silent and the right to refuse consent to searches of your body, your vehicle, or personal belongings. Refusing a search without probable cause cannot be used against you in court unless the officer has obtained a warrant or has conduct a search. Understanding these rights is essential for protecting yourself and ensuring that interactions with law enforcement remain lawful. It is also important to understand that police stops may vary depending on whether you are a pedestrian driver in a different public space. Pedestrian stops often occur when an officer has reasonable suspicion that the person is involved in criminal activity. During such stops, an officer may ask questions and request identification, but the stop must remain brief and cannot escalate into an arrest without probable cause. In some cases, officers may conduct a pat-down if they suspect the individual is armed. This pat-down is limited to searching for weapons and cannot be expanded to search for drugs or other evidence unless additional justification arises. Vehicle stops are more complex because police may use observations during the stop to justify further action. For instance, if an officer smells alcohol or marijuana and the carrier sees contraband in plain sight, they may Have probable cause to conduct a search. Even small traffic violations can sometimes escalate if an officer suspects additional criminal activity. However, it is essential to remember that minor traffic violations will not give police unlimited authority to search your vehicle without consent or a warrant. Special rules apply to certain situations such as school campuses, public transportation, or private property. On school campuses, for example, school resource officers may have broader authority, but constitutional protections still apply. Public transportation stops may involve additional security measures such as random bag checks or ticket inspections, but they cannot be used as a pretext for general searches without probable cause. Private property interactions require careful attention because the owners or managers may have the right to allow officers on the premises, but your personal rights remain intact as long as you are not under detention. Another aspect of police stops involves understanding the use of identification laws. In some states, pedestrians must provide identification upon request if there is reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. In other states, refusing to provide ID without being legally required cannot be used against you in court. It is also important to know your rights regarding electronic devices and digital privacy. Police generally need a warrant or probable cause before searching cell phones, computer, other electronic devices. Even if an officer has stopped you for a minor infraction, they cannot automatically search your phone or social media profiles without your consent or a court order. If you were stopped by police, it is advisable to remain compliant and non-confrontational. Avoid sudden movements or actions that may be misinterpreted as threatening. Always ask the officer if you are free to leave and clearly understand whether you are being detained. If you are detained, remember that you have the right to remain silent and can request legal representation before answering detailed questions. Documenting the interaction by noting the officer's name, badge number, and the circumstance of the stop can also be helpful if any legal issues arise later. In addition to understanding your rights, it is useful to be aware of common misconceptions about police stops. Many people mistakenly believe that police can stop anyone at any time without reason. This is not true, and the courts have consistently ruled that stops without reasonable suspicion or probable cause are unconstitutional. Citizens also sometimes believe that refusing to answer questions or providing ID will automatically result in arrest, while refusal to answer questions is protected by the Fifth Amendment, and refusing a search without probable cause is legal. You must remain calm and assert your rights respectfully. In summary, police stops in the United States are governed by constitutional protections. Under the Fourth Amendment, police generally need reasonable suspicion or probable cause to stop or detain you. Traffic violations and other observable suspicious behavior can justify stop. Pedestrian encounters require reasonable suspicion to detain or question someone. Exceptions exist such as DUI checkpoints and consensual encounters. Understanding when you are free to leave and your rights to remain silent and refuse search is critical for staying safe and protecting your legal rights. Knowing these distinctions can help you navigate interactions with law enforcement confidently and responsibly while avoiding unnecessary legal risks. Awareness of your rights does not mean you should be confrontational, but it empowers you to respond appropriately and ensure that your interactions remain within the law. By following these guidelines, citizens can protect themselves while respecting the role of law enforcement in maintaining public safety. Ultimately, education and understanding the law is the most effective way to prevent unlawful stops and ensure that constitutional rights are upheld for everyone. In addition, citizens should know that legal standards can vary slightly from state to state, and staying informed about local laws and regulations is also important. For example, some states have specific rules about stop and frisk procedures or requirements for showing identification in public, and other states' laws regarding vehicle searches or DUI checkpoints may differ. Being aware of these nuances can further protect you from potential legal complications and help you understand when police actions are lawful and when they are not. In all interactions, remaining compliant and respectful while asserting your rights is the best approach. Avoid arguing or resisting physically, as this can escalate the situation and potentially create legal problems. Instead, focus on clear communication and understanding whether you are legally required to comply with requests or if you are free to leave. This knowledge combined with awareness of constitutional protections can significantly reduce the risk of unlawful stops or detentions in the United States. It is also important to educate friends, family, and others about these rights because many people are unaware of what is legally required during police interactions. By spreading awareness and understanding the nuances of police stops and citizen rights, we can all contribute to a society where constitutional protections are respected and citizens can interact with law enforcement with confidence and safety.